Mr. Folker?
Here.
Dr. Lemke?
Here.
Mrs. Laverde?
Here.
Mr. Novitt?
Here.
Mrs. Sands?
Here.
Mr. Ford? Mr. Borkowski?
Here. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board during our budget hearing, which is separate from our regular hearing? Seeing none, we will move to the budget hearing. Jen, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, just an update on this is our 2018-2019 budget. Some of this will seem familiar because we have presented it twice to Finance, both when we presented the tentative budget and an update on the final budget last week. Legal requirements, the board is required to pass a official budget by the end of its first quarter of its fiscal year, which for us is September 30th, so that's why we're here tonight. Prior to that, they must authorize the placement of that tentative budget on display, which we have done for at least 30 days, schedule a date and time for public hearing, which is where we are, and also publish in a newspaper the availability for the public to inspect the budget. So all of that has been completed. Also, this is just to give you the flavor, as I mentioned. On June 20th, we did a preliminary review with the Finance and Operations Committee. Pretty much spent the summer just watching what was going on in regard to some of our expenditures and some of our revenues. Obviously, when we put the budget together in late spring, April, May, and June, things do change before we get to fall. We did go through some of those changes at the Finance and Operations Committee on September 17th. Those changes have been incorporated here tonight, and we're looking for adoption. Just some background information that helped develop our budget. This is an enrollment projection. As you can see, the green bars starting on the left are actual enrollment numbers from District 67 from 99-2000 through the 17-18 school year. The bars that are clear are projected enrollment based on a cohort survival method. We will update this now once we go forward with your actual first part of the year enrollment for 18 and 19. So an update from when we initially did the budget, we do have 18 students overall less than we had in 17-18, but that's 35 more students than we projected from the year prior. 16 of those students is an increase in our kindergarten class. So as you are very much aware, the board did eliminate fees for extended day kindergarten. Potentially that had impact to our student enrollment numbers in kindergarten. This is the largest kindergarten class, 151 students, that we've had since 2011-12. Now we will better be able to judge that when we see what we pick up going into first grade. We've always picked up a lot of students between kindergarten and first grade. Perhaps we just got them a little earlier, or perhaps this is kind of a wave coming through. We'll see going into next year. This is just a look at enrollment broken down a couple different ways. This is our grades on the left. So as you can see, our lower elementary grades are still our lowest of all of our grades, with our largest classes sitting in the middle school, and then also a school-by-school enrollment on the right. For those that are unfamiliar with some of our acronyms, DPM East is our 5th and 6th grade class, and DPM West is the 7th and 8th grade side. Kind of an overview of our revenue. Our revenue comes from 4 main sources: local, state, federal, and what we call other. And I will cover those in a little bit more detail, but locals generally are property taxes. Property taxes are our largest source of revenue. Also included would be student fees, earnings on investment, our food service accounts. State funds generally are in 2 categories: general state aid, which is revenue to be received from the state that we can apply to any program, any capital project. You have complete flexibility on how that revenue is used. And then also you have some categorical aid, which is typically revenue given for a specific purpose and must be used for that purpose. Federal revenue is completely restricted. All of our federal revenue is related to our grants. Grants are for very specific spending purposes. So typically if you see that you have X amount of revenue, you will see a matching Y expense. They do need to equal each other. Some of the major budget assumptions that are included in this revenue: local, on the local end, we had an incredible amount of prepayment of local property taxes. So with the change in the in the income codes, if you made payments on your property taxes prior to December 31st, you were still able to use that on your income tax as a deduction. So we did have a significant amount. I will cover the numbers later in the presentation. Taxpayers made those payments prior to December 31st. We received those funds from the county in May, which is typically a little bit earlier than we would normally receive them, which would be May and June, or May and September. We also had, in this current budget, we increased interest earnings. One, we have a little bit more cash on hand right now, but two, also we're starting to see the interest rates start to creep up. It's also expected that the Fed's going to move that rate a few more times in the next 12 to 18 months, so we've made that adjustment within our budget. Increased impact fees, although Lake Forest in general does not have a huge amount of residential or commercial development currently, there are still some pockets, and we do see some of those impact fees. As I mentioned, the elimination of kindergarten all-day fees, so we did take that reduction in this year's budget. State payments, they are up to date for 17-18, which is a really great thing to say because it's not been a whole large number of years that I've been able to say that. Typically, I'm telling you how many years or how many payments they're behind. So they are up to date, and they are expected to be flat for 18-19. The greatest part is the third bullet, expected to arrive in a consistent and predictable manner. We don't get a huge amount of revenue from the state, but we sure like to know that it's going to arrive and arrive on time. They have made a commitment to do, and so far they've stayed true to that. Federal, our grant funding is not yet finalized, but as I said, the expenditures will be set to match whatever sort of allocation that we receive. Looking at expenditures, we do classify our expenditures into what we call objects. This is on part of the Illinois Accounting Manual, which says you need to make them into supplies, benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital outlay, other objects, that's where your debt payments and your tuition payments are, and termination benefits. So those categories are predefined, pre-required by the state, and we use those to kind of subdivide our expenditures. Salaries are individually budgeted based on the staffing report. HR does a great job of providing us with a breakdown of who's where, what everybody is doing. We do birds in hand, so everybody that we currently know is returning. When we build the budget in the spring, if there's any open positions, we make assumptions regarding where our typical hires will fall. We do the same thing related to benefits. If we know that we have 3 open positions and we know typically half of our people take insurance, we'll make that assumption when we build the budget. We'll watch that in the summer to see whether or not our assumptions play true. Purchase services, supplies, capital outlay, other, and tuition. We look at historical and projected expenses. Each department does submit their own required requests. We look at planned initiatives, so what things are we currently rolling out to achieve the components of the milestones in the district strategic plan. We look at individual student needs, particularly in regards to some special services. And then bottom line, the availability of some funds, and that typically hits more in the capital area. Obviously, we are very labor dependent. Most of our, large part of our budget is spent on personnel. So just to give you kind of a snapshot from 17-18 to 18-19, we overall, I would say, are pretty flat at 297 in some pieces. We're down 2 administrators. We're down in educational support personnel. We're up a little bit in teachers and a little bit in teaching assistants. Included in that, though, we did have an increase of 3 special education co-teachers, an increase of 1 psychologist. There are offsets, which is how it looks like when you look at that prior slide, that we're only up some pieces and some chunks, because sometimes we do have some natural decreases related to enrollment as well. So we're making those changes and then adding back supports that we feel are needed. We do have a solid labor contract in place through the end of the 19-20 school year. Curriculum is in a year 3 of an English language arts professional development, so that you'll hear for 2 more years. Technology, our new CTO, or I guess he's not that new, 2nd year, Jordan is not here tonight, but real pleased to be able to include a full implementation of his technology 5-year capital plan. We've not always been able to say that as well. This includes $322,000 of what we consider non-optional, so those are structural changes. Those are things to support things we already have in place. That's the rotating. We do have a cycle on our Chromebooks, but also $159,000 on things that are more upgrades, changes that we are making it to move things forward. Also included classroom AV upgrades of $335,000 and replacement of analog speakers, $127,000. Facility improvements. So hopefully you've seen these and you've been able to experience some of them, but The remaining part of the furniture allocation, so some of that did hit last year, the rest of it is going to hit in 18-19. Lighting in our ceiling project, boilers, air handling units, electrical panels, all that work that went down this summer at Deer Path. We finally were able to complete the Cherokee Playground. Sheridan had some roofing done, and then we also need to do some asbestos abatement for the boiler project. All of our projects are pretty much winding down. There's a couple of, waiting for those last few invoices to come in, but all projects, I'm happy to say, were on time, and we were under budget by approximately $215,000. In addition, because of our boilers, air handling units, coupled with our lighting project, we did qualify for some energy grants. So we're receiving rebates back of about $122,000 from North Shore and ComEd combined together. So that was not included in the original budget, in the tentative budget, because we weren't sure at the time whether or not we would actually receive them. We've gotten written confirmation and actually have started to receive some of the checks. So that is in the updated budget you have tonight. Transportation, I guess I have it under budget highlight. It's kind of a low light perhaps, an increase of 7% in rates. We were able to reduce some routes. As you saw by the sharp decline in enrollment, eventually what that does is puts very low ridership on certain routes. So we did combine some routes without significantly impacting the length of time. We did have total then additional 4 more routes this fall, right before school started, that we reduced, 1 at Sheridan, 1 at Cherokee, and the 2 corresponding routes at Deer Path. If you look at the final budget summary, and this is 17-18 versus 18-19, it looks alarming, but we'll go through the details. It shows a reduction of 9% in revenue and a reduction of basically or almost flat on the expenditure side. If you were to take revenues over expenditures, to take a snapshot with revenues of $35.9 million, expenditures of $45.9, it's a deficit of $10 million and some change. But I want to break that down a little bit. When I talked about the prepayment of taxes, on the left is what a normal tax cycle looks like. The board approved a levy in December of 2017. In the spring, the county puts out tax bills, and then we receive those in 2 major installments. People normally make their payments in June and September. So that does cross our fiscal years, but that's a pretty typical year. So what would normally be included in the fiscal year 19 budget is the second installment, so the September collection, and then next spring, so the first installment for 2018 is what would normally be in the budget. And typically those are fairly close to a 50-50 split. So the amount that we expect to receive, half in June, half in September. What happened this year is the board approved a levy in December of 2017. Taxpayers prepaid those. They prepaid their first and their second installments prior to December 31st, before the county even sent out tax bills. Tax bills went out in the spring, and in May, the county released those prepaid funds to us. So what was left to collect then in June was the remaining part of the first installment, and then what was left in September is the remaining, whatever was remaining on the second installment. Very difficult for us to know. We had no idea how many people had prepaid in December. We had no idea until we received those funds in May. And then we had to somewhat make a guess on how many would still make it in 2 equal payments. Would more people pay in the fall? Would people pay the whole thing off in June? So it was kind of a odd year for us. So the impact, and I know this is a lot of numbers, but if you look at the left part where I say extension, $33.1 million is what the board extended as its levy. The next column shows 99.8. We typically collect 99.8% of our extension, right? So there is some uncollectible, but it's very small. So we expect you to receive just over $33 million. We received in those prepayments $8,481,000. Which left the remaining of $24,605,000 to be collected to equal the amount that we would expect to receive. What happened in the spring, and this would happen after we put our tentative budget together, we actually, by the end of June, we know how many people made the first installment, right? How many were left. So it's kind of a puzzle that you keep working as you receive piece by piece. In spring of 18, we received just over $12 million, $12,050,000 of that first installment. That wasn't already paid as part of the prepayments, which left then for the fall, it's a little bit lopsided. It's not quite a 50-50 split. $12,554,000 was left. So if you added all three parts, the prepayments, the spring of 18 and the fall of 18, you would get to the 99.8 that we would expect to collect. For us, it happens to cross fiscal years. If you see my notes at the bottom, it's a timing issue only. That's all that means. We're not going to get any more than we asked for, and we could get more than the 99.8, I guess, if we collected 99.9, but we won't at any point in time receive more than what we asked for, which is the extension. What that means is then taking a look at that from one budget year to the next, if we looked at a normal cycle where the extension was split into equal payments of about half to half, we really received about $3.6 million earlier than what we normally would have expected. So that's a bit odd, but it just resulted in a higher ending cash balance. And then for this budget in front of you now, it looks like we're receiving less money. We're receiving less revenue. That's true, because we received it in last year. So I know this is going to be a kind of an odd-looking thing for years to come without the memory. So I did an adjustment for you. It's the same revenue over expenditures on the left, $35 million collected in revenue, we hope, in expending $45 million, so the difference of 10. If you make an adjustment for those tax prepayments to a normal cycle year of $3,657,000, and then keep in mind all the projects that we just talked about. The board did go out and issued some debt that we received in the end of last year to cover some of these facility improvements and also some additional ones forthcoming. So we had $6.8 million in projects in the 18-19 year. So if you were trying to neutralize those to determine, okay, how well are we really doing if we weren't doing extraordinary things, and if we didn't have taxes come in a little bit off cycle, which is that you would still be positive about $438,000. So in summary, the balance is on budget, unbalanced due to our planned life safety, our capital projects and construction, and of course the early receipt of those tax funds. We will continue to draw funds down from that May borrow. I think the district is in very sound financial shape and will continue to do so. We will remain above the policy target of 10% of our fund balance. We're here tonight for the adoption of the final budget, and then at the next step in the process, so to speak, would be that we take the 18-19 budget, and that becomes the baseline for a new 5-year projection, which Finance and Ops will be reviewing at its October meeting. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I'd just like to thank you. That was super helpful.
And just to keep us, I believe we're voting on this tonight. Is that correct?
It's an action item on your agenda tonight.
Fantastic. And that'll occur during the regular meeting. Any other comments or questions? Very good. Then may I have a motion, please, from a board member to adjourn the budget hearing?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning the budget hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We are adjourned. I will now call back to order the regular meeting of the Lake Forest School District 67 Board of Education for September 25th, 2018. May I have a roll call, please, Eileen?
Mrs.
Aye.
LeVert, sorry, I didn't use the microphone. Mr. Folker?
Here.
Mrs. Sands?
Here.
Mr. Borkowski?
Here.
Dr. Lemke?
Here.
Mr. Ford?
Here.
Mr. Novit?
Here.
Motion carries. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome and all, and thank you for coming. Last month, I reviewed the District 67 mission, vision, and milestones and provided a brief update on some of our progress against that. Tonight, I'd like to briefly review our board-defined core values and our board goals, including a major announcement related to one of our board goals. I'll start with the 3 core values that this board defined for itself a few years ago. First, student-centric governance, meaning what's good for the student is at the core, the center of all important decisions that we make. Second, fiscal responsibility. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers, and we take that responsibility very seriously. And third, vision-centric leadership. Constantly asking ourselves, does this decision move us closer to the vision, is a helpful way to prioritize our limited resources. Personally, I find that using these core values as guideposts is an effective tool when faced with difficult decisions. Now on to the board goals. In January of this year, our board set 5 goals with a timeline of achieving them by June of 2019. Those goals are shown on this screen, and I'll go through them in reverse order. Our board believes that continuous learning is important to any group or any organization, and we believe that's true for us as well. Therefore, we have a goal to establish a board learning goal. Second, we continue to desire to increase engagement between the community and our school district. As part of that objective, our board will be having one board meeting this fall and one again in the spring at one of our school buildings, hopefully to encourage the local neighborhood to come to one of our meetings. We continue to also keep a watchful eye for an appropriate issue to work collaboratively with the community, with the community. The district mission, vision, milestones were created 5 years ago, and while we're making progress on those, we do intend to review them and update them as appropriate. Next, the board set a goal to define and implement a district dashboard, which will include key performance indicators. We often ask, how do we define success as a district? This goal will go a long ways towards answering that question. I'm excited to report that this goal is being actively worked on by our administration over the past few months, and our board will be meeting in October to continue to make progress on the data dashboard. I hope to share much more information on this at an upcoming board meeting later this year. And last but certainly not least, the District 67 board set a goal to develop and align shared service processes in collaboration with the District 115 high school board, and we agreed that the superintendent contract renewal process was an excellent place to start. While the alignment of all shared service processes remains an ongoing effort, I'm incredibly pleased to announce that this board, in collaboration with the 115 board, recently approved and executed a contract extension for our superintendent, Mike Simic. We have extended Mike's contract through June of 2020, and now both District 67 and 115 will enjoy the benefits of his leadership for at least another 4 years. Stability and continuity are important elements of a successful school district. Retaining talent is one of our milestones in our vision, and with this contract extension, we've achieved that at the top of our management team. Mike has been our superintendent for the past 6 years, and during that time, he has established himself as a transformational leader. Those are lofty words, but if you compare either district now against what it looked like 6 years ago, it is striking. At District 67, we've seen new curricula has been implemented across all grades in both math and language arts. An entirely new, different, and better instructional delivery model has been ingrained into our schools with the focus on differentiation in the classroom and the inquiry model, also known as project-based learning. Reimagining aging physical structures into 21st century learning spaces is well underway. We now look at our students as much more than just a number, but as a whole person, and we're even beginning to include social emotional well-being on their report cards. The integration of the district's mission, vision, and vision into the staff's daily life is amazing as they're living it. And perhaps most importantly, a true emphasis on hiring great talent at all levels and providing professional development for continuous improvement has been institutionalized. Mike has a little-known recognition program that he uses where he hands out Transformer toys to staff members when he sees excellence. Due to having a son who went through the Transformer phase a few years back, I learned that Optimus Prime is the leader of the Transformer team. On behalf of the board, I'd like to say congratulations on your contract extension, Mike. We're thrilled to have you continuing as our Optimus Prime transformational leader. Congratulations, and keep up the good work. It's been pointed out that I said 2020. He's actually under contract through 2022 is what I meant.
I'm really glad to hear that.
With that, we move on to the superintendent's report.
This is going to be a little bit clunky because that's how these funny things work here. So let me begin by saying thank you to Mr. Borkowski. One of the significant pleasures of my work here, and to no small degree, whatever measure of success I've had in District 67, I can absolutely thank Mr. Borkowski for that, for his continuous guidance, his encouragement, his insights, and I think one of the things that he knows about me is I love being on a great team. It's one of the things that most energizes me, and one of the things that I'm very pleased and very proud of is I get to be a part of what I think is a really great 8-member team at the District 67 with the District 67 board. Also have the pleasure of being on another team that I'm super proud of, and some of those folks are in the audience here tonight. Administrative team, we have an exemplary group of administrators, and as Mr. Borkowski was going through the slides, one of the things that jumped out at me is this is the stuff that we're doing. Whether it be the new ELA curriculum, whether it be the new furniture, whether it be the math program, whatever it is, these are things that our teachers are implementing, and I'm just always super proud to be considered to be part of that team. So I wanted to show you something that is as good an illustration as I can provide for what's happening in the district as part of the superintendent's report. This is from a random classroom at Everett Elementary. And what you see here is language arts. And I'm going to play this. I'll play it more than one time because it'll be hard to catch it all. But to begin with, there's a little guy here on the floor. This is, I believe it's a 2nd grade classroom. And what we learned from buying furniture is kids K-3 would really rather spend time on the floor rather than a lot of their furniture. Ms. Lasar, is that right? Okay, the furniture is great, but the floor sometimes is even better. And so what you'll see some of this going around. So this is just a sweep of the room. So little guy down here in the corner, another little guy over there on another book. You see tables here in a circle. So imagine what your school looked like back in the day. There were rows, and your English class was rows, and somebody was probably reading. It was probably the teacher, and the students would be called on from time to time. And think of it as a ping pong match where there are 2 paddles. The teacher has one, and the students share one. So how many interactions do they get with the teacher? Not very many in the course of any given lesson. Another big circle of tables over there, not currently being used, because you'll see the kids are all over the place. There are 2 teachers in this classroom. Also, Principal Sopko is there. It's a student working one-on-one with a teacher. And then as you swing around the room, a little bit more. There's a group of students over here, again, in all different places. They're working on a language arts assignment. And so what they've done is they have written something. Some of them have handwritten it. Others have typed it. The little girl with the curly hair here is reading her handwritten paper that she wrote, and she has read that thing. In my time in the classroom, she probably read that thing aloud 6 to 8 times. And so she is getting ready to do what this little girl here is doing, which is recording something that she's going to share with her parents through a program called Seesaw. And this is one of the ways that we break down the barriers one of the things we wanted to do is turn the entire community into a classroom. This is one of the ways that kids do this. So not only do they create this on their own, they practiced it, then they record it in some way. It goes to the teacher reviews it, makes whatever comment they want. They hit send, mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, anywhere in the world, they get to share in that. And this helps the kids accomplish one of the most important things that we want as a district, is we want to own the dinner conversation. We want the kids to have parents that ask them smart questions, and they provide answers and feedback for that. And there is such a difference between what this classroom looks like and what you and I experienced as learners. It's not even funny. It is highly differentiated. There is no ceiling on the curriculum. Every kid is stretched to their level of learning. And not only that, but it is far more visible to people around them that can reinforce that learning. And so the difference, whether it be furniture or curriculum, professional development that we've afforded our staff, the result is that life for kids in the building is completely different and importantly differentiated. And I'm just, every time I go into a classroom, I marvel at this because this looks so easy. You know how hard it is to get 20 second graders to do what they're supposed to do without any sort of direction at all. They are very self-directed. And by the way, I'll show you the final takeaway here from this. This is all being done with a substitute teacher in the classroom. This is what life looks like even with a sub in the classroom now. And that is super hard to do. So hats off to our principals, to our teachers, to the board for supporting all of this work. This is how it shows up in daily life for our kids. You can walk into any one of our buildings, any one of our classrooms, and a lot of the time you have a hard time finding where the teacher is because they're on the floor with the kids too. And the kids will be in the hall, they'll be all in all different places. The most important factor is that the kids are doing the work, not the adult. And it's the oldest story in the world. Who works hardest at Grandma's house? The kids do. Why? Because Grandma figured that out, how to keep the kids busy. And this is sort of like that. So that concludes the superintendent's report. Thank you.
Fantastic. Any questions or comments for the superintendent? No? Thank you, Mike. Public participation. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? If so, please approach the podium, state your name and address. Seeing none, we move on to reports. We have one report tonight, the fund balance report.
It's actually not an official report. It is a piece of paper that is included in your packet as required by board policy. When the board's fund balance exceeds the range of 10 to 15%, we are to provide information as to why we are above 15% and basically what we plan to do with those funds. As we mentioned earlier, we have $6.8 million in construction, which will certainly start to draw that fund balance down as intended.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions or comments regarding the fund balance report that was in our board packet and is available for the public? Great. Moving on. Board committee reports. Board of Education. Jeff.
The Education Committee has not met since our last meeting. We will have our first meeting of the year on Friday, October 12th, here at the West Campus.
Thank you. Questions or comments for the Ed Committee? Board Finance and Ops. Tom.
Thank you. The Finance and Ops Committee met on Monday, September 17th at 7 a.m. at the West Campus. Much of what we met about has already been reviewed by Jennifer, but essentially we went over the 2018-2019 budget, and we also looked at tools to help her with her 5-year forecast plan, mostly centered around CPI, which is a big driver of expected revenues for the district. We've also looked at a new financial reporting model that's being rolled out, and the committee looked at some debt refunding options also, which we've reviewed and I think are voting upon tonight. Finally, the Finance and Ops Committee is going to meet again on Wednesday, October 31st at 7 a.m. at the West Campus, so please come one and all. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Questions or comments for the Board Finance and Ops Committee? Policy Committee, Kent.
No meeting, no report. We'll be back.
Thank you, Kent. Questions or comments for Policy? Compensation Committee, Rob.
Same as Kent.
Questions or comments for Compensation? Joint Shared Services did not meet since our last meeting. We may be meeting sometime soon. More to follow. Moving on to Liaison Reports, NSSED, Suzanne.
NSSED met on August 29th. A part of our meeting was the Leadership Council getting training on board docs, which is going to be the new way that we manage that at NSSED. So I will report to you back on how that works out. Also, the Superintendent, Dr. Schneider, reported that NSSED is partnering with Seesaw, which is another cooperative, to sponsor a community effort centered around mental health and private community providers. Also, NSSED has been contacted by the Lake Zurich Community Unit School District 95 to access learning around the history of diverse learners and integrated comprehensive systems. Districts 30 and 27, which are NSSED member districts, met to discuss the creation of an assessment tool to help identify areas of growth within districts in programming for students with disabilities. And both districts are working with NSSED to research and pilot an assessment tool that could then be used by all the districts in the cooperative, which is very exciting. They are entering into an agreement with Midas Education for a new student information system. One of the challenges at NSSED is they have a number of different systems that when they purchased them from the same company, the expectation was that the systems could communicate with each other so that they could get data. And they don't communicate with each other, and so they have a lot of trouble internally just getting data like student attendance because of it's being done piecemeal in all the different programs, and they're hoping that working with this company, they will be able to get some real data and some assessment data and things like that that will be able to drive what they're doing with relation to the strategic plan, and hopefully in order to help all the member districts access the kind of data that they would want from NSSED as well. So that's exciting. The next Leadership Council meeting will be on October 10th at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Suzanne. Questions questions related to NSSED? Legislative Liaison, Tom.
I actually submitted a report, and I must not have sent it because I didn't check the board packet, and obviously don't have a report in front of me tonight, and I can't remember what I put in it. So I am going to report in October, and it will be riveting, and I'll enhance it from there. That's my report. Well, I'm sure you will. Thank you.
I won't even ask people if they have questions for you. We'll just move on. So, Spirit of 67 Foundation, Suzanne.
Spirit of 67 board met on September 11th. They will be holding their Thanks for Giving luncheon on October 19th from 11 to 2:30 at Knollwood Club. All district parents are encouraged to attend, as well as board members. As a way to support the work of the Spirit of 67 Foundation, invitations have been sent and are available on the Spirit of 67 website. The Raise Your Hand for Education online auction takes place October 16th through 19th, culminating at the luncheon. And their donor update was that the foundation is off to a great start with donations of just over $94,000 as of August 31st. So they had a great registration. Family participation district-wide, they thought was at 42%, and they will be doing their crosstown competition, friendly crosstown competition again this year, inviting District 67 families to make their annual Spirit donations. At the end of the year, the school that has the highest participation will receive an all-school treat party. If a school reaches 80%, they will receive a $1,000 grant from the Founders Fund to be used as they see fit at their school. The next Spirit of 67 board meeting will be November 6th at 9 a.m. here in West Campus.
Thank you, Suzanne. Questions for the Spirit of 67? Executive APT, Jeff.
The APT Executive Board held its inaugural meeting of the 2018-19 school year on Wednesday, September 12th, here in the boardroom at the West Campus. Board President Des Whitty welcomed everyone and announced that this year's APT theme is going to be grit. She reminded folks that even though it may not be possible to teach grit, we can certainly stimulate its development in ourselves and in our children. Marty Vanderveld, who's our recording secretary, reported that all of the school's APT websites have been updated to start the year, so check those out. The building presidents all reported that the buildings are off to a great start. School packs have been delivered, although not without some issues, which I'll talk about in a second. The yard signs have been planted or were planted, and even better, were collected. curriculum nights have been held, the back-to-school meetings have been held, new family events have been held, and the kindergarten play dates all went off without a hitch. So a good start to the year overall at all the buildings. I also received from more than one person thanks to the board for the Cherokee Playground. So people are very appreciative in the Cherokee community. So
Is that because you're the principal there, or because you're a board?
it is, yes. Yes, I've been very engaged with that. Now, with regard to the school packs, we did experience frankly, some disturbing issues this year with school pack. Several weeks before the start of the school year, Katie Frecco, who is our district-level school supplies coordinator, received a call from school pack saying that they were having difficulty obtaining supplies from some of their vendors, and that they were promised they would put a card in those school packs that arrived that were missing items as to what items were missing, so that parents would either know to go get them or would know that they were coming. Unfortunately, at walkthroughs, when boxes were opened, not only were there a lot of items missing, but there were no cards. So, unfortunately, a lot of boxes arrived very incomplete. In fact, according to Katie, most of the fifth grade boxes were almost entirely empty. As a result, parents were forced to go buy supplies at Target and other stores. The good news is the supplies that were missing did start to arrive the following week. The bad news is they were shipped in bulk. So Katie had to break them all down by grade and by child to know which students were missing what items, and spent considerable time and hours going through that process. So hats off to her for all of that hard work. It's not easy. On top of that, School Pack informed us that the transportation company that they normally use to deliver all of the school packs no longer utilize lift trucks, which are obviously very handy when there's no loading docks at some of the schools. So when the driver did arrive to unload, they had to basically hand load all the pallets, or hand unload all the pallets. And as a result, it took much longer than the transportation company had anticipated. And as a result, Katie received word shortly after the delivery that the district may be subject to a surcharge for the additional time spent unloading all of the school packs. So at this moment, there's no word as to whether or not School Pack's going to follow through on that, but that's just another issue that we've had with them this year. And then lastly, they sent the wrong headphones for Cherokee School kindergartners. We wanted what are considered on-ear headphones, and instead they sent over-ear headphones. So just another thing that School Pack kind of screwed up this year. So needless to say, the APT is going to be re-examining its relationship with School Pack, which I know we've used for years. And right now I would suggest the strong preference is to look at going with someone like an Amazon or a Target or a Walmart to do a lot of our school supplies. They offer those services, so they'll be looking at that. But again, special thanks to Katie Frecco for her hard work and trying to work through all of the issues she had to. So, I invite the board members and community members alike to read the meeting minutes, which are posted on the board packet. I try to post those every month so that people can get a much more detailed understanding of what's going on in the buildings than what I'm able to communicate here. So please feel free to go and look at those. And the next executive APT board meeting will be held on Wednesday, October 10th, here at the West Campus. Thank you.
Questions for Jeff regarding the APT? I have one. The APT manages so does the administration have some hand in the school pack, or is it really just the APT deals with it?
Well, parents pay directly, it's just School Pack directly for the school supplies, but APT manages the program, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeff. Any other liaison reports that I may have missed? Come to our second public participation moment. If there are any members of the public who would like to address the board, please approach the podium and state your name and address. Seeing none, we move on to our action items. May I have a motion first to adopt the 2018-2019 budget as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the Perkins and Will Professional Services Agreement for ADA ramps, door handles, and entranceways, and backup chiller for Deer Path Middle School?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Quick question for me. Jen, just for the public transparency, what is the dollar amount on that one?
It's a lump sum, $71,200, and then if the final bids come in plus or minus 10%, then the fee will be adjusted as well.
Thank you.
And the ADA stuff, is for all the buildings. It's just the backup chiller that is only DPM, correct, or not?
ADA is specific to the ramps, and that hits 2 schools, and then there's 77 identified areas with the doors, locks, entryways, so they're kind of
Right.
spread throughout the entire district, yes,
But right, but the DPM mentioned on there is just related to the backup chiller.
correct.
Okay.
And is the 71 grand you just said, is that for the backup chiller or is that for everything?
That's all, and it's a lump sum proposal for all those projects.
Fantastic, thank you.
Mike, just a quick question. What's the timeline for completion on it?
These are all summer projects, summer of 2019.
So, I'm sorry, we're voting on the, there's a higher dollar value associated with the actual work of the projects, but we're not voting on that tonight, correct?
Correct. You're only voting on the go-ahead for Perkins and Will to go ahead and finish working on drawing the drawings, putting it to Pepper, getting it part of that overall comprehensive bid with the, hoping to lump it with the science labs. But yes, it still will be parsed out somewhat separately so that you could reject or accept certain pieces.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mrs. LeVert?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the Lake Forest Bank and Trust multi-year banking agreement?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Did we talk with any other banking institution about also getting our business for this?
We did not. So when we did this process last time, it's a very comprehensive process. We have been pleased. We did bring it to Finance and Ops for discussion, I believe, twice over the last year to see whether or not that was a desire of the Finance and Ops Committee as well. We are pretty tightly connected as far as all of our systems. In addition, we think that they provide some services that we're not able to get at other banks, which is what we noticed through the last round of proposals, particularly the fact that we have the ability to, 5 o'clock on the day before payroll, upload our files. So when you're running 90-some payrolls a year like we do, that's a pretty important feature. Most of them are 2 or 3 days in advance. So we did have improvements in our earning credit ratings, our ECR. In addition, we have dipsticked our actual rate of return that we receive from sweeping our funds out on a nightly basis. We sweep them out into the market. And there were times that no one else, for most of the part, they could not touch us liquid as far as our actual earnings on our interest. So I did have other school districts that wanted to send their money to me so I could invest it into our funds. So we actually went through some of the components, and we think they're more than comparable, and the service they provide is top-notch.
Okay. Tom, anyone else from the Finance and Ops, you are okay with that as a recommendation as well?
I'm absolutely fine with Lake Forest Bank and Trust, yes.
Other questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mrs. LeVert?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the second reading of Press Issue 98, 5-year updates and collective bargaining agreement updates?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. LeVert?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the second reading of Policy 6:30, Organization of Instruction Update?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Questions or comments?
The only change to this policy, as we discussed last month, is the elimination of the kindergarten subheading. Everything else stays the same.
Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mrs. LeVert?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
May I have a motion to approve the second reading of Policy 6:92, Instruction Update?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mrs. LeVert?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the second reading of Policy 3:50, Administrative Personnel Other Than the Superintendent Update?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the first reading of Policy 4:80, Accounting and Audits?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the human resources items as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We now move to the consent agenda. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. I'll now read the items on the consent agenda. Approval of disbursements, payrolls, and financial statements, July and August 2018. Approval of release of executive session minutes, February 27th, 2018 to July 19th, 2018. Minutes of a regular meeting and workshop, August 21st, 2018. Minutes of an executive session, August 21st, 2018. Disposal of audio recordings, January 24th, 2017. Would any board member like to have any item removed? May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda item as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Moving on to FOIA requests. There were no FOIA requests this month. Announcements. Monday, October 8th, no school, Columbus Day. Saturday, October 13th, PSATs for our 8th graders right here at Lake Forest High School West Campus, 8:30 a.m. through noon. Saturday, October 20th is the second opportunity for our 8th graders to take the PSATs, same place, same time. Tuesday, October 23rd is our next Board of Education meeting. The agenda says it's here at 7 p.m. That may change, as one of our board goals is community engagement. We'll be looking at which one of our board meetings this fall will be on the road. More to follow.
As long as I get some notice so I can post it in the paper.
Perfect. Eileen and I will chat tomorrow. May I have a motion to adjourn the Lake Forest School District 67 board meeting?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.